We're joined by Claudia Duran and Tony Cho. My name is Matt Haggman. I'm with Opportunity Miami. And we're going to have a conversation today around climate and clean tech. That is such an important conversation, one that I think for many of us, we hope to see a lot more, and we need to see a lot more in our community. And in fact, when we think about the past year, efforts like Daniel Kleinman's Seaworthy Collective, awesome, and something that we hope that with the work of Endeavor and Future of Cities with Tony Cho, that we just drive more and more and more. Because as we think around Miami's economic future, it can be such a driver of jobs, it can be such a driver of opportunity across our community. So to have this discussion after you listen to me talk muted for about 30 seconds, we're joined, of course, by Claudia Duran and Tony Cho. And to kick it off first, to each of you, I'd like you each to give a brief introduction, and we'll jump in with some questions, and we're going to have a conversation for about 30 minutes. So Claudia, why don't we start with you?
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So I'm Claudia Duran, Managing Director of Endeavor Miami, and we are supporting entrepreneurs to scale their companies. So we're right now covering South Florida, but always looking for innovation and founders that are willing to take their companies to the next level. So we're very excited to announce and launch together with Future of Cities the Endeavor Lab Accelerator that we're going to talk more about in a few minutes.
Tony.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. We've known each other a long time. My name is Tony Cho, and I'm a longtime impact entrepreneur in South Florida, born and raised in Florida. I'm the co-founder of the Magic City Innovation District, was one of the original pioneers of the Wynwood Arts District. I started a company named Metro One that has been around for about 17, 18 years that has really been focused on revitalizing the urban core neighborhoods of South Florida, like Wynwood and Little Haiti. And I'm calling you from my eco-retreat sanctuary, Chosen, up here in Central Florida in Sebastian on the banks of the St. Sebastian River. Pleasure to be with you guys.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about this conversation. And to kick it off, I want to share with you a story from a previous conversation, actually on an Opportunity Miami podcast. And we spoke to a person named Clay Dumas, who runs Lower Carbon Capital, which is this $800 million VC fund focused on investing in companies building the net zero future. And he said that actually the transition to our economy to one that is carbon neutral presents the biggest business opportunity of our lifetime, which of course is a different frame. We often talk about addressing sea level rise and climate change as something around, an existential threat and saving the planet. And that's all true. But it also presents a generational business opportunity. And Tony, I want to start with you. You're someone, as you mentioned, we've known each other a long time. We knew each other back when I was a reporter at the Miami Herald, and then at Knight Foundation and all the rest. And you've had such a successful career in real estate. What prompted you to focus in your work? Of course, you've been revitalizing neighborhoods and been such a thought leader of what our communities should look like and be. What prompted you to jump in to sustainability and Future of Cities and make that really the priority of your work?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I've been passionate about sustainability for decades now. I tried to launch the first Green Building Resource Center in my office in Wynwood about 16 years ago. And it fell on a lot of deaf ears. People had no interest in recycled materials or smart gadgets or smart homes or any of those things. So I was a little early, in the curve on sustainability, and way before it became in vogue or in fashion. But I really love the point that you made about, carbon capturing technology as being a huge business opportunity. And I think, there was a report that I was reading that by 2040, 2050, there's an opportunity to surpass the fossil fuel industry, the carbon capture business, and carbon in general. So I think it presents one of the most generational, impactful business opportunity and an opportunity to really change the course of humanity at the same time. So I think it is timely and it's very important. And I think that, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, I want to demonstrate to people that you can And I think that that's something that people don't really understand. And it is good business by doing the right thing, because we need to be able to breathe clean air, drink clean water, eat healthy food, and survive without all of these toxicities in the environment. And so I think that it is great business because everybody's going to be focused on health, and health is wealth, and the health of our planet is wealth as well. So I think that we're seeing a paradigm shift in the way that we look at the current situation and how we underwrite risk, how we look at opportunity, and how we look at carbon as a business in general.
Claudia, so Endeavor, of course, is built on finding really extraordinary entrepreneurs, providing them support, and helping them scale, and turning those stars into futures and mentors of the next group coming up, and creating that flywheel, in a way to build ecosystems, to drive economies, to expand opportunity. Why now have you and Endeavor Miami, and full disclosure, by the way, I sit on the board of Endeavor Miami, so full disclosure with that. Why now have you decided to focus on clean and climate tech?
Well, first of all, I had the great fortune of meeting Tony last year, and we got together and started discussing everything that he just said, how important it is for all of us to be more conscious and start working together to have a more positive impact in the planet, and finding those entrepreneurs that are actually already at the forefront and working with different types of innovations to help this world become more sustainable. So we came up with, we created this partnership, and we launched the Endeavor Lab to go and find the founders who are working with clean and climate tech, and just being able to support them for them to get more visibility, obviously here in Florida, and to connect them to the right people so that their companies can scale successfully. So we're really excited to find these innovations and just put the word out for all these founders to start approaching us, not only Endeavor, but also Future of Cities and other organizations that are very keen to support them in being successful founders. Because if they're successful, then the impact that they can generate in our ecosystem is going to be even greater.
Now, as we think around making this transition to a net zero future, and of course, this journey of ours is really one that we're on over the next 28 years. I mean, the science is clear that, if we don't achieve net zero by 2050, then the planet will start warming in some really bad way, and bad things will happen. And so it's something that is, and while 3 decades can seem like a long time, on the other hand, that's not far away at all. So the moment is at hand. And as we think around transitioning to an economy that's net zero, that includes everything from how we get around, to how we manufacture and build things, to how we produce foods, to how we cool our homes, or the past few weeks heat our homes, where we get our energy from. Tony, talk to us a little bit about some of the areas that are top of mind for you in this transition. Of course, you come from an extraordinary real estate background, and talk to us also what this might look like. Bring us into that future, into that sustainable net zero future.
So people always love to ask that question. What does the city of the future look like? And I did a talk in Berlin at Tech Open Air, and I put a picture of the Emerald City, from Wizard of Oz up, because it was glimmering emerald, green, which was my analogy for, but really, at Future of Cities, we're really practicing regenerative placemaking, which is we don't want to be prescriptive in what the future looks like, because there's cultural considerations, there are historical considerations. It's really about co-designing it. But when we talk about the macro issues, and specifically, let's bring it down to Florida, which is one of the geographies that's most at risk to climate change and sea level rise in the world financially. So people need to understand there's places where there's more populations that will be impacted by climate change and sea level rise. But financially, Florida has the most to lose as a coastal city mostly at sea level. So it's a dual strategy of adaptation, and innovation, and reducing the carbon at the same time. So, you have to eliminate the carbon at a macro level globally, and we can't do this without a global effort. So China, and India and the big players need to be on board. So there's only so much we can do in that place. And that's where I think technology is really what's going to disrupt the whole carbon capture industry in general. And so we need to be investing a lot more money, in carbon capturing technologies to accelerate the reduction of carbon in our atmosphere. And I think that Florida should be ground zero for rapidly prototyping those solutions. And we're not. There's very little climate tech dollars going into Florida in general and in South Florida. And that is why, we partnered with Endeavor and with Claudia, and specifically focusing on minority and women founders to really focus on these problems, because there's really not an emphasis on it. We're launching a fund, an impact fund that's focused on prop tech and climate tech and clean tech later this year. We work with Full Cycle, which is a climate tech fund as well, and really kind of fund to fund co-invest in technologies that we think we can prototype in our own projects, but also other developers and other partners around the world can prototype these solutions and see what works. Because the built environment doesn't move quickly. Your wife is in real estate. Things take time. Infrastructure takes time. And the future, what we talk about, you listed 30 years, but we can start seeing the impacts of climate change today in 5 years, 10 years, with big storm events and surges and things like that. So we need to rapidly prototype these solutions now. I'm talking to the folks from Oceanics, which is a UN habitat floating city concept that's being prototyped in Busan, South Korea. We're having an immersion this weekend, actually, with the founders, with some city officials around those types of solutions. So we believe that Florida needs to be the poster child for climate solutions, not climate problems.
Correct.
And that's what we want to be part of.
Now, Claudia, if, in so many ways, as we think about the efforts around sustainability and the environment, you can sort of think of them in three buckets, right? There's civic activism, which we've seen a lot of over the years. Efforts around policy reform. I mean, we just went through COP26, where there's lots of efforts around what governments can do. And then innovation, right? When entrepreneurs, scientists really leaning in and thinking about what are those sort of game-changing new technologies and businesses that can create this future. But Endeavor, you're, of course, in that third bucket. And, of course, with Future of Cities. Talk about the program that you're going to be doing with Future of Cities. Talk about when it will be, how it will run, what entrepreneurs can expect to participate.
Yeah. And before I go into the program, I think from my experience working with social entrepreneurs in Brazil, and then with the public sector also to tackle all of these problems, and then the private sector also doing their own innovations within the corporations. But I think the opportunity here is for founders to incorporate all of the work that social entrepreneurs have been doing, and then also partner with the private sector to incorporate those technologies into these bigger companies, which are actually the ones that are causing most of the issues and the carbon in our atmosphere. So I think these innovations that these entrepreneurs are developing, I think is going to be the key solutions to tackle the problems that a lot of these bigger companies are. I mean, we're talking about multinationals, and it's harder for them to change their whole value chain at this moment. So it's easier to incorporate technologies, right, and work together hand in hand with founders. So I think for this specific program, I hope and our mission is to work with the founders, not only during the program, but also connecting them to the public sector, and working hand in hand with them, and then hopefully with Tony, and possibly in the future, maybe his fund could invest in some of these companies. So it's all like we are all working together for one goal. And like Tony said, is a fertile ground, Miami right now, for all of them to not only experiment and test the technologies here, but the impact can be seen very immediate. It can be actually very fast for Miami to incorporate these technologies. So very excited. A lot of good things are going to come out. And for all the founders that are working with clean and climate tech technologies, the accelerator applications are now open, so they can apply until the 13th of February. And the link is going to be posted in the chat. and you can also go to our website and find it. But we're looking for companies that are generating between 50,000 and 500,000 in revenues. So they have a product market fit and it's post revenue. As Tony said, we're focusing on minority-led companies. So it's also a privilege to be supporting minorities through this accelerator. And the modules, once we select the 10 companies that are going to be participating, we start the modules on March 8th and they run until May 5th. So it's going to be about 2 months of intense work hand in hand. And we're going to be sharing a lot of the information on the companies and the founders throughout the whole program on social media so that people can follow us.
Super cool. And for founders, where can they be from? Is it founders here in South
Florida? Sorry, all Florida.
Got it. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Tony, Bill Gates, of course, just last year wrote a book about how we transition the entire global economy to one that's carbon neutral. And in the book, he wrote that the countries that build the carbon neutral companies of the future will lead the global economy. Now, with that in mind, I think if you replace countries for cities or communities, that we'll see that similar impact, right? And as we sit here today and think about climate tech and clean tech, there really isn't necessarily one place that's distinguished itself. I was having a conversation not long ago with Christian Hernandez of the VC 2150 in London. And one of the questions was, is there sort of a Silicon Valley of clean tech? And he said, no, not yet. He said, actually, we're seeing things in many different cities and countries around the world being done, which was heartening to see, that sort of geographic diversity. On the other hand, my guess is that there probably will be a few places around the world where we see an especial amount of activity on clean tech. And Miami, of course, in South Florida, can be one of those places. Be curious from your perspective what you see are some of the real assets that Miami has to be one of those places where the newest climate tech and clean tech companies are born.
Great question. And no, this is a global crisis that we're facing. So the solutions will be global, and Europe in particular is more advanced. The Netherlands and Denmark and Sweden and a lot of the Nordic countries have been very advanced, in terms of lifestyle and climate and building materials, etc. Miami is having a Miami moment, in the words of Mayor Francis Suarez, and I would agree with that because I've been in Miami my whole life. There's an incredible amount of intellectual capital, creative capital, financial capital, innovation coming in to a city that's very vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. And the UN forecasts also that the built environment will at least double in size in the next 30 years. So it's an opportunity for us to take innovative building materials with very strict building codes, because we have hurricanes, to prototype hempcrete and 3D printing homes and buildings, which we're investing in as well, looking into modularized, containerized, and construction methodologies and materials that are more efficient, that are more resilient, and we have to have the will of the public domain as well to support us in investing in these ideas. And they can't be archaic in their thinking, from urban planning and the way that we do this absolutely has to be public-private partnership. It cannot be just the private sector that focuses on innovating and rapidly prototyping these solutions. And I can tell you that why I also am confident in Miami is I've been in touch with all of the main administrations, Miami, Cava Levine's office, Francis Suarez, Gelber. All of them are forward thinking. They're leaning in. They're very supportive of technology and innovation. They understand the risk of climate change. They're investing in it. We have the Aspen Institute Climate Conference happening here in May. So Miami is quickly becoming, instead of developers and my colleagues putting their heads in the sand and ignoring it because it's bad for business, actually we can flip it on its head and make it a positive selling point, because we can actually become the most resilient city if we invest in it. We invest in these building materials and we become a demonstration project. So I think Miami, it can go either way. It depends on how, conscious and how much we embrace the future and future-proof our future neighborhoods, our future buildings, and particularly what we're interested in is the most at-risk, vulnerable communities, that don't really have the option. People who live on Miami Beach or have a waterfront home, they can that's probably their fifth or sixth home. They can relocate. I'm not so worried about their survival. It's the people who are most vulnerable that we have to really look to and look out after to make sure that they're taken care of. And I think this idea of attainable, sustainable housing needs to be achieved. And we're going to have to prototype different models than what we're currently using, because it's not solving the big problem. And we do need support from the federal government. There's a ton of infrastructure dollars being doled out. There's a ton of money going out all over the country. Well, I think we need to really target, and I know that we are targeting some of it, but a lot of those resources to Florida and prototype these solutions so that we can export them. We should be exporting climate solutions from South Florida, not importing them.
Yeah, in so many ways, it feels like that, you look at places like the Netherlands, where if they build this expertise and they're taking it to the whole world. And furthermore, to your point, it really does feel like, you've in your work, you've been so involved in building the arts community here in Miami. And that's a value when people think of a place that they attach to the place. Is it a place that is culturally interesting and culturally alive and culturally diverse and all that? And you wonder going forward, in fact, I think you all probably agree, and I certainly do as well, that when people think about places, they'll attach a value to its sustainability, like in terms of its sustainability practices. And just like they think of cool neighborhoods and cool art scene and cool food scene and cool startup scene, they'll think about, cool sustainability scene as well. Claudia, I want to turn to you. And I know I guess we're probably getting pretty close to time because but talk about, here you are, Endeavor is a global organization, operating in countries around the world, and now in many cities in the U.S. Talk about what you see are Miami's differentiators, Miami's advantages in diving into climate tech and clean tech.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Miami right now is becoming very popular. A lot of people are moving to the city. I think it's a very important time for all of us to preserve the biodiversity that we have here and really cultivate and protect the city. So it's a crucial moment to also start working collaboratively with all the people that are moving to the city so that they are also aware of the risks and being conscious about how they can contribute. So having people be a part of this process with Endeavor, Future of Cities, joining the conversation, I think is very important. And for Endeavor, I mean, we started here 8 years ago because we saw the fertile ground to develop an entrepreneurial ecosystem. It's a very strategic location. It's the gateway from Latin America to the United States. And it's also right now becoming a very important technology hub. So with all of that and all this interest in the city, I think our role right now is even becoming more important, right? To be able to have that consciousness and founders to also start developing their technologies and also paying it forward in some way to the city, right? Either joining our conversations or being more aware of how they can contribute through their companies to become more sustainable, right? And be able to contribute to going carbon neutral at some point in the near future. So I think it's a very interesting moment in history for the city. And going forward, there's a huge potential for all of us to work together to really preserve the city and be able to develop, like Tony said, together with the different mayors, making sure that we don't get that sea level rise in 20 years and we're all underwater because we don't want that. We want to keep living in Miami. So like making sure all the animals that are all, freely walking in several neighborhoods, they can still feel they can be here, right? And we preserve all the nature, the trees. Because I saw Miami the other day from the airplane. There's a lot of green areas and a lot of trees. And I feel we need to preserve that because it gives us the oxygen. And we're very fortunate to be next to the ocean, which also gives us clean air. So I think we're at this moment that we all have to work really hard together.
Yeah. Well, we'll close with one final question to each of you, and then we'll wrap up for what has really been a really fun conversation. This is a really exciting collaboration between Future of Cities and Endeavor Miami, and launching this effort to really stir and support entrepreneurs in the clean and climate tech space. I guess the question that I'll pose to both of you, and Tony, I'll start with you, and Claudia, I'll let you close us out. As we launch into this, well, we've been launching into this, but as we take another step on Miami's journey as it relates to sustainability and clean and climate tech, what is it, Tony, that leaves you most optimistic as you think about Miami's future and Miami's sustainable future?
I think what makes me most optimistic is seeing the change in leadership, being much more conscious and aware. I went to COP26 in Glasgow, and Mayor Suarez was there, and Cabo Levine was there, and presenting. And so being at these, having Miami having a seat at not only Miami, but other cities in Florida, Clearwater, Orlando, having a seat at the global table is very important, because we are ground zero for this crisis. And so that is encouraging to me, because the first step at solving problems is accepting that you have one. And that's a novelty, because the reality is there's still people who are climate deniers and don't believe in science, and that's okay. And I don't want to get into a political discussion, but I'm born and raised in Florida, and I see the impacts of climate change, and for not only climate change, but biodiversity loss, and what's happening with all of the suburban sprawl and all of the concrete and the concretification of our entire state. And I live in the core of the state, where we have all this natural beauty and biodiversity. I have 600 bird species where we are, and we have 26 endangered species. We have the Florida panther, we have the bald eagle. And people, when they think about, Florida, they think about South Beach and they think about Disney World. And it's a much more diverse and dynamic and interesting place that we really need to look at the whole ecosystem as a whole. And that's really what regenerative development speaks to, is that you have to look into 100% of life, not just humans. We've become so focused on our own civilization that we haven't realized that there are other species around us, and that we need to build societies that are in balance with 100% of life, like Buckminster Fuller, always believed and always said. And so we've gotten beyond, we've expanded beyond our resources, and we need to pull it back, and we need to be intelligent species that actually want to survive. And I think that we have that. So I'm most encouraged by leadership, all the innovation, all the capital, all the new ideas, and the opportunity. And I really think that it's our future to make. And I think leaders like you, Matt, Claudia, and other people, that's what gives me hope in this community. And the conversations that we're having now are incredible. So many people are galvanizing. And because of the pandemic, a lot had to do with the pandemic, so many more people are connected. And so movements can happen like that. Information travels like this all over the world. And so when an idea, worth spreading happens, change can be instant. And so that's really what gives me hope, is that when we find solutions, the whole world will know about it, and we can rapidly deploy them. And I think that we're kind of up against time. And I think humans become most innovative when we're threatened. And I think people are starting to acknowledge that there is a threat. It is real. And now this is where the innovation starts happening.
Awesome. Claudia, what gives you a sense, as you launch, with Tony on this collaboration between Endeavor Miami and Future of Cities, what gives you optimism about Miami becoming a center of this really, really critically important work?
I'm feeling very grateful and happy that we're coming together as a community to prioritize the solutions to tackle these problems. And I feel that Miami is at least it welcomed me with open arms, and I'm feeling that we're also welcoming newcomers here. And we're all looking to preserve in the long term the health of the city. So I think we're going to start, this is just the beginning of starting to collaborate. I think what we're doing right now with Tony and Future of Cities is just the beginning of a long-term relationship where we're going to do much other things in the future. And again, incorporating, I think, like you said, Tony, Mayor Levin Cava, and Mayor Suarez are also wanting to work with clean tech and climate tech. So in the near future, we can also do other things with them and just work public-private sector together, hand in hand, and bringing all these amazing innovations we're going to discover through the accelerator. Because I can't wait to meet the founders and really help them scale their companies and connect them with the right people that can help them be successful. So I'm looking forward to this. Don't forget, if you are a clean tech and climate tech minority founder and you're interested in applying, the deadline is February 13th. You can go through our website or the link in the chat. And we are really excited to meet you and learn about your company. So looking forward to working with all the founders. And as I said, this is just the beginning. So very excited for what's to come.
Awesome. Tony Cho, Claudia Duran, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Claudia.
Sure. Bye.
Bye-bye.